I was able to play with, be best buddies with someone who had a very similar lived experience to me, just on the other side. We were both British, trying to kind of reconcile this conflicting culture, and at the same time we found a way to connect in our commonalities despite the disparity. Hello everyone, how are you doing? It is George Anastasi here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about a time when I was about 11 or 12 years old and had a best friend who was Turkish Cypriot. I don't think I really valued it at the time for what it was, but now I look back and I realize just how profound it has been on my life. But before we go into that, I want to say a big thank you to the outpouring of love that I received from the comments from my last video. There are obviously always going to be negative comments, but most of you really felt that what I said resonated. I got messages from people who shared their stories about their experiences visiting the northern side of Cyprus. So I really appreciate all of those messages. I also want to say that I completely acknowledge that some of the information and facts that I mentioned in the video I didn't get correct. I apologize to anyone who may feel as though I offended them. I am constantly learning and growing in my understanding of my identity and my country's history. Sometimes I'm going to get things wrong. It definitely was a bit of a lazy thing on my part not to double check such a simple fact. If you want to know what I'm talking about, you can go to my last video and check it out. But I hope that if you enjoy my videos, you can subscribe and you can learn and grow on this journey with me, and we can educate each other so that we can all grow in our knowledge and understanding of our history. By the time I was living in Cyprus at that age of 10, 11, I had already lived in Bahrain, Malaysia, Zambia and England, and I'd lived in Cyprus twice before. So I'd been coming back and forth to Cyprus. This time we went and lived in our house that we had owned ever since I was really young. Our house was in Limassol, right off of the Drodos roundabout. Right when you come from the motorway from Paphos, you pass the Bolemidia roundabout and then you get to the Drodos roundabout. You take a left off that roundabout and you pass Garceraz on your left. Please give me a shout out if you know Garceraz and if you have any stories connected to Garceraz, because every time we would drive up to our house, we would pass Garceraz, and it was just that local supermarket. As a kid, I just could never be bothered. I was just like always dragged in there. But is it still there? I don't even know. Let me know in the comments. So anyways, I lived all the way up in the mountains in a neighborhood called Mondegorfi. It's right next to a village called Abesha. And we lived in a lovely bungalow house, and I enrolled at a school in Nicosia. So the idea was I would be commuting every morning from Limassol to Nicosia. And my parents were both teachers, so they worked in the school that I had worked in. And I'd wake up early in the morning, and sometimes my mum would get a big babloma, big blanket, and I would lie across the car in the back and just sleep in the pillow, and then she'd have my uniform ready and I'd get ready in the car while we were in the traffic on the Nicosia motorway. And every day when we would drive on the motorway, we would see the flag, the Turkish flag, on the mountains of Gerinya, and you can still see that. I believe you can see it even from space, like it's visible from space. So as you're driving through the Nicosia motorway, you're always reminded of Turkish occupation, because this mountain has a humongous flag on it facing the Greek side, which is kind of a slap in the face. Needless to say, at that age, my opinion of the Turkish Cypriots wasn't great, but at the same time, I didn't feel so deeply or strongly about it. I didn't live through the occupation. My judgment was based on my parents' judgments, and my mother would always say things like the Turks shooed my dad out of his village in Morfu, and the Turks never took care of our churches. You know, they put animals in the churches and we kept their mosques nice, and we'd hear things like that, and so there was always a negative view towards the Turks. And then added to that, you see that Turkish flag in the mountain. It just doesn't really give you the best image. Me commuting to Nicosia to this school was in 2005, so it was a year after the borders had opened up. So before 2004, we couldn't, as Greek Cypriots, even visit the Turkish occupied side. But now Cyprus, the southern side, had become part of the EU. So it was new. It was like, oh my gosh, like we can actually visit the northern side. I remember as a kid, my mum took us to the border and we would see with the barbed wire and the soldiers, and she'd say, look, it's divided, you know, we can't go over there, but that's where your granddad's village is. And now it was open, and so there was a real curiosity. So I went to this international school, mainly Greek Cypriots, but you also had all sorts. We had a Filipino guy, we had a Polish guy, and then there was this guy who incidentally had the same name as me, George. He was this chubby, ginger-haired, freckly boy, but he was Turkish Cypriot, and we hit it off, you know, like a house on fire. We enjoyed the same things. We enjoyed reading books and playing video games and playing outside, all the typical things that young boys enjoy doing. And I think also we were both British Cypriot. He was British Turkish Cypriot and I was British Greek Cypriot. The only difference is that I'm full Cypriot, but his dad is English and his mum is Turkish Cypriot. Upon learning more about him, I realized that he was actually living on the Turkish occupied side, and he was commuting every day to school and crossing the border and coming to this school. Now, I believe that must have been possible because he had a British passport. Our friendship was really strong. We were best buddies, and I had lived all over the world at such a young age that the differences and things like that didn't bother me specifically. Now, did it bother other kids? I didn't live his experience at high school. I do remember he wasn't particularly best friends with the Cypriots, and so perhaps him being Turkish Cypriot has something to do with it. I actually went to his house once, and I remember talking to my mum about this recently and telling her, like, you know, do you remember I went to his house? And she said, yeah, I remember, and it's strange, like, I can't believe that we actually allowed you to go over to the Turkish occupied side at that time, especially considering that it had just opened recently. I remember his mum clearly. She was a lovely lady, and her and my mum had organized for me to go and visit, and my parents must have let me because that's the thing, we were very international. My parents were okay with me going into kind of uncharted realms, and they were open about me, you know, exploring new things in terms of culture. And so I remember vaguely the border control and there being guards and them checking my passport. And the most distinctive, most vivid thing I remember is when we crossed over, just the complete difference in infrastructure. I just remember everything looking completely war-torn, and concrete buildings and buildings that hadn't been refurbished yet or taken care of. It just looked like a place that hadn't been kept up. Another thing I remember is there being Turkish iconography and flags everywhere. And now, again, don't quote me on this, but I remember there was a slogan that said something like this: a good citizen is a Turkish citizen. Something like that. Do not quote me, I'm not 100% sure, but it was something along those lines, some kind of propaganda type of slogan like that. A good citizen is a Turkish citizen, proud to be Turkish. Everywhere, it was like that. One other thing I remember is going to his house and him living all up in the mountains of Gerinia, beautiful, beautiful mountains. And, you know, we spent a nice time in his house. He lived in a bungalow, much like mine. I lived in Mondir Gorfi in the mountains in a bungalow. And I just remember us playing in the mountains and me having this feeling of not being in my home country. It just felt foreign. I've said this in my last video, but as a young person, I felt like I was playing on Turkish mountains, and the terrain is the same, but there was just a sense in the atmosphere that I was not in my home. Now, me and my friend, we kind of lost contact because I was only at that school for a year. Then I went on to another school in Cyprus. So our friendship was short-lived. I'm glad I did that at such a young age because I feel as though it's informed my opinion and my judgment towards the Turkish occupied side a little bit more. I was able to play with, be best buddies with someone who had a very similar lived experience to me, just on the other side. We were both British, trying to kind of reconcile this conflicting culture of being British and Turkish Cypriot or Greek Cypriot. And at the same time, we found a way to connect in our commonalities despite the disparity. I think children are so pure when it comes to that. We don't discuss those things. We don't talk about those things. We don't allow those things to get in the way. And what we do is we connect based on what we like. We like playing, we like reading, we like talking about our friends, and that's all that matters. And I suppose that's a real big lesson for the adults of this world. You've got the Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, and we have so many similarities. It's like if we put everything else aside and just talked about what we cared about, which is similar, which is our families and food and our jobs, then we would be able to be the George and the George best friends. I guess I'm really thankful to my parents for being okay with me being friends with this boy and allowing me to experience that. I really encourage parents to do that more often, to allow their kids to integrate with children that are different to them, whether it be Turkish Cypriots or whether it be Chinese, with all the pain that has come with the war, to find a way to reconcile that pain and find a way to nurture your kids' understanding and connect your kids with children of the other side in a plight to reconnect and be the Cypriots that we are, unified. That's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. I do plan to maybe do a follow-up video of this. Well, I'm trying to get in contact with George, and I found him on Facebook, but he's not responding. So I'm going to keep trying to get in contact with him, and hopefully we can have a video chat sometime to talk more at length about our friendship, because I would like to give you even more details of what our friendship was like. But I really do appreciate you watching this video, and I look forward to hearing your comments and your opinions about being friends with the Turkish Cypriots. And if you had any Turkish Cypriot friends growing up or as an adult, I'd love to hear your stories about what your friendship was like. Leave it down in the comments and I'll read it and respond. Thank you so much for watching this video. I think I'm going to be making videos bi-weekly given my current schedule teaching in China. So I hope you will stay tuned and subscribe, and thank you so much for all your support and your continued support, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.